Welcome back, Geometry, to continue our work on Standard 5 using logical reasoning to construct proofs of congruent triangles. So just a reminder, here are level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So a 1 is if you can identify the appropriate criteria for congruent triangles within the context of a proof. Okay, you're approaching proficiency. Level 2, if you can construct a 2-column proof for congruent triangles using given information and one or more of the following: vertical angles, reflexive property, or right angles. And we'll be coming up on that in more so as we continue on the next couple of days. And 3, you are considered proficient, right? The level 3 here, if you can construct a 2-column proof for congruent parts of congruent triangles using given information and one or more of the following: midpoint, angle or segment bisector, perpendicular lines, or isosceles triangles. And you are at a level 4 exemplary if you can construct a 2-column proof for a midpoint, angle bisector segment, for a midpoint, angle bisector, segment bisector, or isosceles triangle using CPCTC. So again, you're not necessarily expected to know what all of these mean at this time, but by the time we are done working through all of Standard 5, you will be able to. All right, so in class 18, IC18 in your notes, it's page 35, okay? So definition of congruent, remember that's our symbol for congruent triangles, says that you have 3 pairs of congruent corresponding sides. So for example, if I have this side congruent to this side, okay, maybe this side is congruent to this side, and then our third sides are congruent. Okay, remember your markings for those. Okay, and we also have 3 pairs of congruent corresponding angles. Okay, so let's go congruent, opposite angle to the first congruent side. Those angles are congruent. The second angle is opposite the second congruent sides, right? Opposite. Okay, and then the third angles would be congruent as well. Okay, so here we go with the side, side, side. SSS stands for side, side, side. So feel free to write that down if you need to. Okay, that is when you have 3 pairs of congruent corresponding sides, and that stands for side, side, side. That's what the 3 S's stand for. Okay, so again, for example, if we have one side corresponding, okay, we have a second corresponding, and then a third are all congruent. So these are congruent, congruent, congruent. We have 3 pairs of congruent corresponding sides. So that would make the side, side, side postulate. Okay, so any guesses what SAS stands for? Okay, maybe got that. Side, angle, side. So this stands for side, angle, side. Okay, so this would mean we have 2 pairs of congruent corresponding sides, right? Sides showed up twice, with 1 pair of congruent corresponding included angles, right? They have to be inside, included angles. Okay, so for example, if I have side, angle, and put a little star in there, angles, and then another congruent corresponding sides. So side, angle, side. See that specific order has to be a side, then an angle, then a side. Okay, so if the angle's over here, that would not be. The angle has to be between the 2 sides that are congruent corresponding sides. Okay. HL theorem. This one's a little bit different. HL. So let's see if we can work on that here. Okay. HL happens when you have a right angle. So let's put the right angle mark in here. The little box says that that's a right angle then. Okay. HL theorem says that you have one pair of congruent corresponding legs. That means one that's not the hypotenuse, right? Okay. So for example, let's say it's this leg. Okay. And you have one pair of congruent corresponding hypotenuses in a right triangle, because you can't have a hypotenuse or a right angle if it's not a right triangle, right? Because there's a right angle, we know it's a right triangle. Okay, so what's this stand for? The hypotenuse leg theorem. Okay, so you have the legs and then corresponding, congruent corresponding hypotenuse. Okay, so this is going to be quite a bit. So this is going to be one of those you definitely want to make sure to study. The left column here is what's provided on the sheet that you'll be allowed to use on assessments, okay, but not what they mean. So that's what the part that you need to make sure to study so you understand and know what that means. Okay. What do you think ASA stands for? Angle, side, angle. So that means we have two pairs of congruent corresponding angles with one pair of congruent corresponding included sides. Okay, so for example, let's say here's a congruent corresponding sides, and we have, say, this angle is a congruent corresponding angle here, okay, and then let's say we have this. I'm just going to make different symbols in here, and a congruent corresponding angle, so angle, side, angle. Okay, so if your angle was over here, it'd be angle, angle, side, so that would not be angle, side, angle. Okay, and as we've already mentioned, that stands for angle, side, angle. Right? And the last one in class 18 today, before we do some examples here. Okay, the last one is AAS. And what do you think that stands for? Angle, angle, side. Okay, so by now maybe you can go fill this in. That means we have how many pairs? We have two pairs of congruent corresponding angles with one pair of congruent corresponding non-included sides. Non-included means it's not between. Okay, so for example, if we have a congruent corresponding angles there, and for example here, okay, then in order to be angle, angle, side, this would be an example of the side that would be, so angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side. Okay, so that's the non-included. It's not the side that's between the two angles. Okay, the non-included. So up here when we said the included, okay, the angles between the two sides. Okay, difference between included and non-included there. All right, so one more time, let me zoom out so you can get this whole page. Definition of triangles. So we have 6 new theorems or postulates here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some work to practice using them and identifying them so that we can get to the proofs next. Okay, not today, but we'll get there. So we're going to do some work practicing identifying which of the 6 we have. Okay, so we have, for our first one, markings on that number 1. Okay, based on what's being marked, are they congruent? Okay, it says, are the following pairs of triangles congruent? If they are, then in the criteria used from the other side. So from our first page here, tell me which of the 6 is the reason for why. Okay, so are these triangles congruent? My answer is yes, because we have side, side, side. Okay, so here, example 2, we have the little marking to show these 2 angles are congruent corresponding angles. So we have side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So side, angle, side, one of our theorems or postulates. It is indeed. Okay. Next, we have a right triangle, so we're going to look at the HL theorem. Okay. So HL theorem says we have a leg that's congruent corresponding legs with a congruent corresponding hypotenuse. So yes, HL theorem. And that's the abbreviation I'm going to use for theorem. Okay. Example 4, and at any time feel free to pause the video to check to see if you can do some of these on your own and hit play to check it. Okay, but make sure that you check it. Okay, so we have an angle, corresponding angles marked, another corresponding angle, and then a congruent corresponding side. So is angle, angle, side a criteria? It is indeed. It was our last one. So it's yes. The triangles are therefore congruent triangles because of the AAS theorem. Okay. Next, you look at that. We show through 3 congruent corresponding angles. And do we have one that says A? No. AAA is not a postulate or theorem. Okay. Example 6, congruent corresponding side and a congruent corresponding side. And before that, we had the angle. So we had an angle, and then we had side and a side. Okay, so we had angle, side, side, or if you went the other way, you would have side, side, angle. Is that one of our theorems or postulates? No. So the ASS or SSA is not a postulate. Okay, think about it. That is not a postulate. All right, and our last row of problems, 7 through 9 here. Again, if you haven't yet, try pausing to see what you can get on your own. Okay, have to go in order. Okay, so on the last one, we have a congruent corresponding side and then a congruent corresponding angle. And we're kind of waiting for more, right? So no, we don't have enough information to give any criteria, right? None of our postulates or theorems other than the hypotenuse leg theorem had only 2 parts to it. Anything involving the sides or angles had 3. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a congruent corresponding side, actually. Then we have an angle, and then we have a congruent corresponding side. So here we have side, angle, side. And if we look here, we have angle, side, side. Or side, side, angle, whichever way you want to go. So the answer is no, because we have SAS for one triangle and SSA or ASS for the other. Okay, they got to have the same exact criteria. Okay, and then on the last one, if you look at that, we have a congruent corresponding angle, congruent corresponding side, and then another congruent corresponding angle. So angle, side, angle theorem. Is that a theorem? And it was. So my answer is yes there. So again, I'm going to zoom out so you can see that entire page. And after completing that number 9's example, you should now be able to go ahead and do homework 18.